Hey there, and welcome to LChat. I'm so glad that you all are joining in tonight. For those of you who are joining in for the first time, and you may not be familiar with LChat, this is just a informal weekly chat on Thursday nights to talk about blogging, business, and design. This is a chat for creative entrepreneurs. And if you're unfamiliar with who I am, I'm Lauren Hooker, and I'm the graphic designer, online business strategist, and blogger behind Ellen Company. So I'm so glad that you all are in here tonight. I'm excited to talk about high quality photos and how to capture them for your business. And for those of you who are joining in for a second, third, fourth time, the screen might look a little different for you. We're using a new webinar platform called Crowdcast. And I'm really excited to be using it. I hope that you enjoy it too. You'll see in the right-hand corner or right side of your screen, it should be, or maybe it's over here for you, that there's a chat feature. So go ahead and say hello in there, introduce yourself, tell us what you do, add a URL to your site. I know that I would love to see it, and everyone joining in would love to see it too. But some of my favorite features are underneath this window. And there's one for you to ask questions. So at the end of this LChat, we're going to ask Chaitra some questions, and you get to join in with questions that you have. And when they start coming in, you'll see that you're able to vote on them. So if you're interested in hearing one of those questions answered, you can bump it up. So we can answer them in order of popularity. You'll see too that there's a polls section, and I already have a poll going, and I'm asking you, how do you currently capture photos for your business? Is it through your DSLR? Is it through your iPhone? Do you use stock photos at the moment because you're a little intimidated to take photos for yourself? Or did you have a professional photographer do them for you? Whichever one is the most relevant, let us know. So tonight we have Chaitra from Pink Pot coming on to join us to tell us about how to capture photos for your blogger business, and not just any photos, high quality photos. So I'm going to take a moment and let her introduce herself. This is Chaitra, and hello, thanks for joining in.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. I am so glad to be here. So I am Chaitra from itspinkpot.com. Pinkpot is a design and photography studio for bloggers and creative entrepreneurs. So basically, I work with creatives on branding, web design, and web development projects. Also, I started a new venture called the Creative Convex around 3 months ago, which is basically a photography resource for bloggers and small business owners. So under this, I provide free photo packs each month with high resolution photos that you can use for your blog post graphics, sales pages, mockups, social media graphics, and basically anywhere you need to. So the Creative Convex community has been growing pretty quickly, and people love using the photos, which is really amazing. So yes, that journey has been pretty interesting so far, and I do have a few exciting launches coming up very soon. So yes, so far so good, and I'm really excited to see what's in store for 2016.
Yes, and Chaitra and I have actually known each other now for maybe over a year, at least a year, when she reached out to me. And ever since, we meet at least once a week on Fridays. It's our time to meet up and talk about business stuff. And I'm always asking her about photos. So it was about time that I brought her in on an LChat. I'm excited to have her in. And I know for a lot of people who are joining in, you're probably joining in this webinar because you're a little intimidated to take photos for your blog, for your business, like Chaitra said, for sales pages or landing pages. All of the time in marketing, we're looking to use photos, and people are looking for photos. People engage with photos more. So I don't know about you, but when I first got started, I had a DSLR. I didn't know how to use it. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew nothing about lighting or composition. And so we're going to talk about those things today. And I know for Chaitra in particular, photography has kind of transformed her blog and her business and helped get her started. So Chaitra, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's totally true. Personally, for me, visuals have made all the difference. And that's also one of the main reasons why I started Creative Convex as well. So when I started my blog a couple of years ago, I was blogging about lifestyle and beauty. So the beauty and lifestyle community is very saturated, and it's really difficult to stand out there. So obviously, it was difficult to grow my blog and to drive audience to my blog. But also, very soon I realized that having great images on your site made it super attractive to readers. So that's when I was like, okay, I've never held a camera before, but let's do this. And slowly, as my images started improving, more people started coming to my blog and started noticing it. So in fact, I can hands down say today that photography caused the turning point for my blog, if that makes sense. So yes, I've had firsthand experience with visuals being really important for growth. Also, with visual content marketing platforms like Blog11, Instagram, Pinterest. Pinterest is like huge. You don't want to miss out on that opportunity of attracting visitors via these platforms. So yes, visuals are quite integral to any business, I suppose.
Yes. So jumping right into that in particular, that's a good lead in. So when you're first starting out in photography and you're trying to get those great photos for Instagram and Pinterest and get them out for your blog, where do you start with photography tools? What would you recommend from a very basic level to a more advanced level even?
Yes, this is a great question because I remember when I got into photography, I was kind of confused as to where to start, what to buy. You know, even in terms of equipment, you're just kind of lost when you start off. So I'm really happy to share my recommendations with you guys. So the first thing I want to say here, though, is that photography equipment can be really expensive. So I'd say before investing in it, be sure that you will make full use of it, right? So the camera is okay, it's a one-time thing, but the lenses, the accessories, and the other equipment, they all can add up really quickly. So yeah, just have a think before you purchase the equipment. But yes, apart from that, I love talking about equipment. So yes, if you're just getting started, I'd recommend just 3 tools: a good camera, of course, a good lens, and Photoshop. So let's just talk about each one of these. So camera, often when people are getting started, they have questions like, should I use my iPhone, or should I invest in a DSLR, or can I just use the point and shoot that I already have? You know what? The best camera is the one that you already have. So just start off with it. And eventually, once you're into it, you can invest in a high-end camera. When I got into photography a couple of years ago, I did a lot of research before buying the equipment. So personally, my recommendations for camera would be the one I bought initially. It's the Canon T3i camera. That one is amazing. It's an entry-level DSLR, and it's probably one of the best ones you can get out there at its price point of under $500, I suppose. Yeah, it's under $500. Also, I recently upgraded when I started Creative Convex. I recently upgraded to a Canon 6D, which is a full-frame DSLR, and it's an amazing high-end camera. So if you want something more advanced, that is a good one too.
So will you say it again? What was the first one that you bought? What was the name of that camera and the second one that you bought?
Yeah, it's the Canon Rebel T3i. That is the first one I bought. That was, I think, $499 or something like that. Canon. And the next one, yes, I'm a fan of Canon. So I haven't really tried Nikon, but I just know Canon is like super amazing. So yeah, Canon. And the recent one that I bought around 4 months ago, 5 months ago, is the Canon 6D. So that is slightly, yeah, it's a full-frame DSLR, and it is expensive, but again, it has a better sensor, and again, the quality of images is better. So yeah, that's a great camera.
And in these cameras, they may cost a lot up front, but they'll last you years and years and years.
Yes. I do have my Canon T3i, the first one. Even now, I don't want to give it away because it's just such a wonderful camera. It's like, I'm not giving it away.
It might come in handy again.
Yes, yeah, you never know. Yeah, I use it time to time. Yeah, sometimes I do use it. Yeah.
So after
Okay.
the camera.
Yes, after the camera. So when it comes to lens, if you're using a point and shoot or your iPhone camera, you don't have to worry about the lens because these cameras come with built-in lenses. But let's say you're using a DSLR. So in that case, I'd absolutely recommend one particular lens. It's the Canon 50mm f1.8 lens. I've researched the internet in and out, up and down, and this is hands down the best lens for taking block photos. I've used a few different lenses. I often rent them out just to try them before I purchase it, just so you can save some money in that way. So, but I always come back to this lens in particular. It gives you that amazing, dreamy, blurry background where it, the foreground kind of pops.
Yes.
Yeah, that effect is amazing with this lens. Honestly, just don't even think about it. And plus, it's just $99. So yeah, just go ahead and buy it. It's a wonderful investment, definitely.
That's awesome. And when you said that you also rent lenses before you buy them, where do you rent them from?
Okay, so there, I live in Seattle, and there's this Glazer's camera rentals or something like that. So they have all equipment, like the most expensive camera to the most entry-level one for rent out. You can rent it out, try it, and then, if you like it, then you can buy it. Instead of buying it and kind of figuring it out, it's better to try, right? Plus, because photography equipment can be really expensive.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I love that advice. I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Yeah.
I might be doing that.
Yes, that's a great idea. Also, now once the camera and lens is kind of set in place, you don't want to forget editing. According to me, 50% of a great photo is down to editing. So for editing, I'd say Photoshop. There are a ton of photo editors that kind of get the job done, but if you want to get into photography, I'd say Photoshop, just because it's an industry standard. And also, it's an incredibly powerful tool for your other creative needs as well. So if you're a designer, if you're a photographer, if you're a calligrapher, so for any creative need, I think Photoshop is an amazing tool to kind of know. So yes, Photoshop, a good camera, and a great lens, you should be ready to go.
I love that. And I love that you said, too, that the best camera is the one that you have. Because even now with iPhones, you can take a really great photo with an iPhone if you know just a few tricks of the trade.
Yes, totally.
So as far as tips go, what are some simple tips that you have, whether you're using an iPhone, a regular digital camera, or a DSLR? What are some just simple tips for taking better quality images?
Okay, so this is one of my favorite questions, and the one that I asked a lot when I was starting out as well, because you are lost when you're starting out. So this is my favorite question, one of my favorite questions. So basically, I think to develop any skill, the fundamentals are super important. So my topmost tip would be to understand the basics of photography. Like, for example, the exposure triangle or the rule of thirds for composition, these kind of things. So try to understand how photography works, dig deep into understanding why your photos look the way they do. And also, when you understand how your camera works, you can also try out different settings to see what differences they make in your photos. So what I do is take a photo, stop, and observe what settings I used and what effect they had on the photo. Now, again, I would tweak the settings, take the photo again, and compare to see what changed and why. This, I think, will definitely help you if you're just starting out.
Yeah.
So this is like my top tip. But yes, after that, I'd say get good lighting, of course. Lighting can make or break the photo, and it's probably the most important component to getting a good photo. I am very stubborn and use only natural lighting for my photos. It's kind of funny because I plan my photo shoots by looking at the weather app, just so I can use the magic of natural lighting. But again, if you cannot work with natural light, you can always use artificial lighting kits that you can buy on Amazon. Apart from that, I'd say focus on the styling and composition of the photo, because this is where you can get really creative and stand out. So also try taking your photos in different angles, just so you have more options when you're kind of editing, just to see what works the best for you. Yes, and basically just have fun with it. It's all about learning. So just take a lot of photos and observe what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that you said too, taking a photo and then thinking about all that went into that photo and then just make little adjustments. I know for myself, my iPhone is full of what might look like the same image over and over again, but I've either moved a little to the side, or I know on my iPhone too, you can click so that something, so say I had, I don't know, a printable on my desk, and I really wanted the text to be clear and be noticed, and be in focus. I can use my finger to hold down so that the camera on my iPhone will focus in on that one part. And yeah, so when I go to take the photo, that's in focus. Or even just like if I'm shooting into light, I'll move a little so the light will hit it from the side. Something along those lines where you're just making those teeny little changes and they can make a huge difference. Yeah. I love too that you said lighting. And do you think it's easier for beginners to start with just natural light before adding other light sources in? Would you recommend that they start there?
Yes, totally. Definitely start with natural light, because the kind of freshness it adds to your photo, I think it's really hard to imitate with artificial lighting. So if there's like a huge window in your house, just go right next to the window and try to get some light into your photo frame. And otherwise, if you can go shoot outdoors, then that's great as well. Yeah, so definitely natural light any day.
Yeah, I think too, because when I first started taking photos, I wasn't really thinking about the shadows that light was making. So when I had a bunch of different light sources, whether it was natural light and a photo, or a lamp and an overhead light, they were all casting these different shadows, kind of like on my face right now. There's a bunch of different light sources. But with natural light, it's usually only coming, really, if you're setting up by a window, from one direction. So it's easier to plan out those shadows and get the effect that you're going for. Would you agree?
Yes, totally. Yes, totally. And also with these artificial lights, especially if they're not the professional ones, they can add this cast as well to your photos. Like if you're using like this tungsten kind of bulb or something, it can add this yellow cast, and it can make it really warm and yellow. Your photos can be really warm, and it'll just kind of throw off the white balance of your photos. So yes.
Well, you brought up white balance. Would you explain what white balance is for those of us who might not be as familiar with that term?
So I think white balance is basically the balance between whites and blacks and the grays of your photo. Like they kind of give the right, I think they express the colors in the best way if you have the balance of the whites correctly in your photo. Right. Again, I don't want to say something wrong, but it's all about adjusting the levels in your photo, just so the colors look closer to real life. Right. The closest to. So when you use an artificial light like this, it'll make it too warm. And actually, in reality, it's not that warm, but it looks like that only because of the light casting. Yeah.
And with natural light, it's easier to get that pure color, the more realistic color than the other. So even right now, I wish I could turn around my screen and show you. I have a lamp light on my desk right here, and it's really blue. And usually it's not this blue. We changed out a new bulb. But the overhead lights are yellow. So there's yellow, there's blue. It's just not. I wouldn't take a photo with these on. Yes. But with daylight, it won't. It doesn't do that quite so much with the yellows and blues of lights. But that's something to keep in mind as you're taking photos.
That's true.
But yes. But in terms of composition, so what do you, when you're planning out a photo, what do you take into account in terms of like negative space or where things are placed? What would you recommend for composition?
So for composition, I just keep things really simple. Instead of throwing in a lot of things together, I just use one thing as my main object and kind of create a theme around it. So let's see if I can help. Okay. So I have this candle. So let's say I'm taking a picture of this candle. So the focus is going to be around this. And I'm just going to probably add a few props like maybe matchsticks or some kind of decor things around this just to kind of evoke that emotion. But mostly I use a lot of white space around my photos just so the subject stands out. And I put a lot of things in the background so I can get that blurry background thing. And it really looks very nice. And this looks very sharp in the foreground. So yes, that is one of the things when it comes to composition. But again, I also know that many people use something called the rule of thirds when it comes to composition, right? So basically, the rule of thirds is used as a guideline while composing your photos. So what it says is, imagine your frame, your image, as a 3x3 grid, and you divide the image into 9 equal squares. So there are 2 equally spaced horizontal lines, and there are 2 equally spaced vertical lines. So what the rule suggests is that you place the subject along one of these lines or at the intersection of these lines, the intersection points. So this, people say that it gives a great composition if you follow this rule. But again, I think this is something to kind of keep in mind while starting out. But once you get into photography, you kind of figure out everything. And this is not a rule you'll generally stick to.
Right. With the rule of thirds too, imagine a tic-tac-toe board over the top of your photo.
Yes.
That's usually what I think of. And I think a lot of times we can see that the composition of a photo looks right, but the rule of thirds and that tic-tac-toe board might be the reason why, that it's falling along one of those angles. And I've heard too, just in terms of styling, and as I've been preparing for this visual marketing course that I have coming up that launches 1 week from today in an LChat, which I'm excited about. But your eye doesn't like perfectly symmetrical things.
Yes.
It's a rule of odd numbers too. So when you're styling something, I've heard like a bouquet of flowers, you don't want just 2 in there, 4 or 6. It always looks better when you throw in that odd number. Your eye likes it. So for the rule of thirds, when it falls along one of those lines, for some reason, you respond better to it. It looks better in your mind. So if you're struggling with coming up with a composition for your image, try off-centering your subject a little bit. I like what Chaitra said too, of just focusing on one subject and trying to tell a story around it.
Yes.
Visual storytelling. So some really great tips there. So for those, I'm going to check back in on our poll just to see, but it looks like the majority of people in here have a DSLR camera. A close second is an iPhone. But for those who have purchased a DSLR, or for those who have an iPhone who are thinking about purchasing a DSLR camera, can you briefly explain to us the exposure triangle? And I saw too in the comments that Tashana has said aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. But let's go into each of those a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, sure. So exposure triangle is a key concept when it comes to photography. But first of all, what is exposure, right? So exposure is essentially the amount of light entering your camera. We usually refer to exposure in terms of how dark or how light a photo is. So the brighter the photo, greater the exposure, and darker the photo, lesser the exposure. That's what it means. So although this whole thing seems pretty straightforward, to take a photo with the correct exposure, in reality, it can be quite tricky to achieve. So that's where the exposure triangle comes in. There are 3 main things that come into play when we talk about exposure: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And these are the exact 3 things that stand at each corner of the exposure triangle as well. So basically, these 3 together determine the amount of light that's entering the lens and its interaction with the camera. Okay, so now to make things easier and less technical, let me explain this with an example that is closer to home. Okay, so think of your camera as a window, okay? And the window has blinds that open and close to let light enter the window. Okay, now think of the blinds as the shutter of your camera. So like window is is to blinds, camera is to shutter. Okay. Okay, now let's talk about each of these: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So aperture is like the size of the window. When the blinds close, the size reduces, and when you open the blinds, the size increases. So the larger the window is, more light can enter through it, and smaller the window, lesser the light that can enter. So similarly, higher the aperture, greater the light entering the camera, and therefore brighter the image. And lower the aperture, lesser the light entering the camera, and therefore darker the image. So that's what aperture is. Is this kind of clear?
Yeah. And I meant to say this earlier,
yeah.
Those who are tuning in tonight are going to get free cheat sheets for each one of these. So for aperture, for ISO, and for shutter speed, part of my new course that I'm creating is on photography, and I created cheat sheets for those who are trying to shoot in manual. And so for everyone tuning in, I'm going to send you and email you those 3 cheat sheets. So I'm going to share my screen with you really quickly, and I'll show you a demonstration or the cheat sheet. Hopefully you can see my screen. So this is for aperture. So Chaitra, I don't know if this is helpful for you, or if you want to go through and explain this now that we have a visual along with it.
Yes, just a second. So, okay, that is a picture of the depth of field. So, okay, that is a picture of the depth of field. So on the left, you can see the F numbers, which kind of correspond to the aperture. So lower the F number, that means the aperture is higher. So that means more light. Okay, so as you can see, the shutter is kind of decreasing as you go on the left, and the depth of field is increasing. So the blurry background is really difficult to get when your depth of field is very deep or very is basically higher. So when it is F/16, when the F number is 16, the exposure is really, really low, and the depth of field is low too, which means that everything is in focus. You don't get that blurry background. But on the first one, when I say F1.4, you can see the shutter is really open, and there's a lot of light coming in, and that means your photo will be brighter, and also it's easier to achieve that blurry effect in this case.
Yes. So this little graphic is there to help you to keep by your side if you're learning how to shoot in manual, to come back to and to help you out there.
Yes.
So what do you want me to move on to next, Chaitra?
I can continue with the window analogy and help explaining the shutter speed and ISO as well.
All right.
Okay, so now that you kind of got a peek into aperture, let's talk about shutter speed. So going back to our window analogy, shutter speed is like the amount of time the blinds of the window are open for. So longer the blinds are open for, more light enters. And lesser the blinds are open for, lesser time the blinds are open for, less light enters. So obvious. So similarly, if your kind of shutter is same thing. If the shutter speed is very high, that's like 5 seconds, let's say, your shutter is open for a long time, so a lot of light comes in. But if your shutter speed is very low, like 1/250th of a second, that means the shutter just opens and immediately closes. So the amount of light that's entering in is really low. Yeah, so that's shutter speed.
All right. Okay. I think I have a, do you want me to show the visual?
Sure.
Okay, I'll share my screen again. One moment. Okay. Oops, forgot to put it back on me. Thanks, guys, for bearing with me. All right. So let me scroll down here to shutter speed. All right.
Okay. Yes. This is exactly what I said. So on the left, you can see 30 seconds, 15 seconds, 8 seconds, 4 seconds. So that means the shutter is open for that long, like 8 seconds. I don't know if that is exactly seconds, but when I read some time ago, it said that unit is seconds. So maybe I'm wrong, but let's just say it's a unit of time. So, but if it's open for 8 units of time, that means the exposure is really high, because there's a lot of light entering in, because the amount of time the shutter is open for is long. But let's say, coming to the right side of the, the whole picture, 1/500th of the unit of time, that means it's a lot lesser, and the shutter is open for a very small fraction of a second. So obviously the amount of light that's entering in is really less, and that's why your photos might be darker if you shoot at such low shutter speeds.
Right. So in terms of action too, when it says action blurry and action sharp, will you explain how the shutter affects things in motion? So if a kid is running with a soccer ball, how does shutter speed affect that?
So basically what happens when the shutter is open for a long time, it can record motion. So let's say even when you're taking a photo with your camera, if your shutter is open for 5 seconds, then it can easily record that tiny shake from your hand as well. Okay. But if it's just open for, just a fraction of a second, it doesn't record motion. So in the case of the boy playing soccer, it's easier to record a motion when you have long exposure, like probably 4 seconds, 2 seconds, or 5 seconds more. But it's very difficult to kind of capture motion when you have very short shutter speeds. Yes.
So if you want to catch someone with motion, you don't want it to be blurry, then you'd want a really
high shutter speed. Yes.
And if you want it to be a little more blurry, then you would want a longer exposure, so a longer shutter speed.
Yes, that's true.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. I'll put it back on you now.
Yeah, this is kind of difficult to explain,
I know.
Yeah. Okay, now coming to ISO and the window analogy. Okay, this is getting really window. Okay, but anyway, let's imagine that you are sitting behind the window with a pair of sunglasses on. Okay, some cool sunglasses. Now, you will be more sensitive to the light that's coming from the window when you wear a lighter shade of sunglasses, right? And obviously, your sensitivity to light is lesser when you wear a dark shade of sunglasses. So that's exactly what ISO is. ISO sets the shade of sunglasses that your camera lens is wearing. ISO refers to the sensitivity of the camera sensor to light. So lower the ISO number, lower the sensitivity to light, and darker your photo. Higher the ISO number, higher the sensitivity to light, and kind of brighter your photo. So basically, the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, these three things together decide the exposure of a photo. And it's all about juggling these three to get the perfect amount of light.
Right. So will you just, so now that you've gone through each one, and I'll show the ISO cheat sheet in just a moment, but to put them all together. So the window is, or the shades on the window, that's aperture. So if they're pulled a little right, will you just go through all three of them quickly together?
Yes. So the camera is your window. The blinds are like the shutter. So the aperture is the size of the window. So as the blinds come closer, the aperture kind of decreases. And the amount of light that's coming in obviously decreases. So if you want more light, keep the blinds open, keep the shutter open. So the aperture is bigger, so more light is coming in. Okay, so that's aperture. When it comes to shutter speed, it's the amount of time your blinds are open for. So if you're keeping your blinds open for a long time, a lot of light is coming in. So similarly, if you keep your shutters open for a long time, like 5 seconds, then obviously a lot of light is coming in into your photo. So your photo will be really bright. Again, ISO is like the sunglasses thing. You're wearing sunglasses and sitting behind the window. So if the sunglasses is light, it's not, it doesn't have a very dark tint. If it has a light tint, obviously your sensitivity to light is higher, right? But if it is a darker shade of sunglasses, then you can't really sense the light that strongly. So similarly, ISO sets the shade of the sunglasses that your camera lens is wearing, right? So higher the ISO number, that means the sensitivity of your camera sensor is more to light, so your photos will be really bright. And similarly, if it is on the lower end, that means your sensitivity to light, the camera sensitivity to light is lower and the photos will be darker.
I love that you have that analogy, and it looks like everyone who's tuning in, if you haven't heard of that analogy before, and it's been really helpful for them.
Awesome.
So I'm going to share my screen one more time for ISO, those sunglasses for the camera and the sensitivity to light. I love that. I had not heard the sunglasses one, so I think that is so clever.
It's kind of easy to understand. It makes the whole thing easier.
Yes. All right. So here is ISO, and I think, you should be able to see it now. So do you want to walk through these settings, Chaitra?
Yes, totally. So just like I said, when the ISO is low, so the conditions when you should keep your ISO number low is there's already a lot of light. So a sunny day without shade out in the open, you don't need more light coming into your photo. So it's already good weather, so you can keep your ISO number low. And as you go step by step, you can see that, let's say ISO 400. So this is the setting that I normally use on a normal day, a sunny day in the shade, an overcast day, or later in the day. So yes, when it's normal light, when it's not too high, when it's not too low, that's usually my ISO is set at 400. So I don't have a lot of light in this case. I have moderate amount of light coming in. So ISO 400 works great. Now, as you go down, the ISO number is increasing. So the camera sensor is more sensitive to the light that's coming from outside. So if you have a really dark room and the lighting is really bad, so in that case, increasing your ISO really helps to bring in more light into the photo. So once you come to ISO 1600, inside, when your house lights are your light source. Yes, when your house lights are your light source, the lighting is really low. It's not great lighting. So that's when you kind of increase your ISO number. So used on dark evenings at concerts, parties, or weddings. So at concerts, parties, imagine a dark concert where the light is really low. And the only way you can capture what's going on is by increasing your ISO. So on such occasions, you can use high ISO numbers like 1600. And some cameras really allow your ISO to go up really high. So, but one disadvantage that I want to mention here is that as you increase the ISO number, your quality of image kind of decreases. So that is one disadvantage of using high ISO numbers. So at 100, your image quality is really high. So there is no graininess in your image. But as you go to 1200, 1600, the graininess in your photo kind of starts increasing. So the quality kind of starts to decrease. So this is one thing to keep in mind. But honestly, until 640, 800, you will not be able to see this graininess in your photos. So it's okay to go up till 800, I guess. I've gone up till 800 to 1000 on really bad days in Seattle, and it's not really caused any harm to my photos. So yes, that should work.
Yeah. And usually too, when you have a really high ISO, I think I'm right on this, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it starts to pick up all of these particles. Too. So your image, it looks grainy because it's really sensitive to light, and it's picking up all of those little particles that you don't see in the air. Is that right?
Yes, it's the noise. Basically, it adds all the noise into the photo, and it kind of results in that grainy texture of your photo. Yes.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. That was such a great analogy. That was so helpful.
Awesome.
And it seems like everybody in the chat has been enjoying it too. Remember, for those of you who are tuning in live, that there's a question feature underneath too. So if you have a question, we're going to open it up for a Q&A in just a few minutes. So feel free to leave it there and we'll try to go through each one. So now that we've gone through kind of the settings of the DSLR and the exposure triangle, what are the advantages of using a DSLR? We know that they're expensive. We talked about kind of the pricing of them, but why is a DSLR worth investing in?
Sure. So I think the biggest advantage of using a DSLR over other cameras is the control you have over your exposure settings. So the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO that we just spoke about, you cannot control these values normally in a point and shoot or your phone camera. So that means you cannot control the exposure of your photo in these cameras. However, in a DSLR, you can. So that is definitely a huge advantage of a DSLR. Another thing is that the camera sensor in a DSLR is bigger and it's better. So the quality of the images will be higher. So that graininess that I was talking about, that will not be there. And the quality of the images will be really higher compared to your other point and shoot cameras.
Right. So it's worth investing in because you can get that high quality look that you're going for, and you have control over how the camera is taking in light and more control over what your final product is going to look like, rather than being restricted and hoping that the camera can figure it out and make it look nice. Although you can take a really nice picture with iPhones now, but you can still tell a difference. It's just not as crisp or clear as taking it with a DSLR. And two, Chaitra, what would you recommend in terms of, I know that you said this before, but I know for myself, I'm very much a perfectionist. So I was intimidated to start with a DSLR because I wanted to get it just right. But I've learned that I have to spend time behind the camera, just figuring it out and making those small tweaks, like you said. So for you, when you started diving into photography to come up with better blog photos, how long did it take you to start feeling comfortable behind your camera?
So there's actually a little story when it comes to me learning the DSLR. So I was actually working in a university that time as a research scientist, and I was also blogging. So I was getting into photography, but I was very wary. I didn't want to invest in a DSLR. So I got to know somehow that the university library kind of allows you to borrow the camera on weekends. So every Friday, I would borrow the camera, take it home, practice on the weekends, and bring it back on Monday morning. So that's how I started learning. And it took me almost, there were times when I really got frustrated at the beginning. I'm like, what is this? I mean, whatever aperture value I put, whatever shutter speed value, it's just the photos are not coming out the way I wanted it to. But it took me about 2 to 3 months, I guess, before I got into the groove and it really started working out.
And no pun intended, but it started to click.
Yes, it started to click, yes.
So for those of you who are, I don't know, kind of stumped by your DSLR, just set aside some time to just have fun with it. Lately, I've just been trying to have a little photo shoot for like 30 minutes if I'm trying to take a photo of something. And it's kind of fun once you get started to just experiment. And I hope that's where those cheat sheets will come in handy for you too, where you can just keep them by your side and look at them as you're figuring out the settings on your camera. And I know for you, Chaitra, and for me, I use a Canon as well. So where do you find those settings on your camera too?
Okay.
Would you recommend looking at the manual for everyone and actually reading the manual instead of trying to figure it out on your own?
Yes. So it's a common habit to throw away the manual as soon as we get a technical appliance or anything, basically. But for camera, please don't. You'll be a little lost without it. So definitely look at especially with point and shoots and phone, you have very limited options with what you can do. So you don't have a lot of things to experiment. But when it comes to a DSLR, there are a lot of options. There are a lot of modes, dials, settings, buttons, menus. So you really want to set aside a few days to kind of explore your camera, just to understand what each thing stands for and just to see what's going on with the camera, what you can do. Because these DSLRs, honestly, even after doing all this, I don't feel like I'm using even 25% of my DSLR. I just feel there's like a lot more potential that is kind of not explored by me yet. So yeah,
Right.
I think there's a lot to explore with your DSLR. Just take a few days off and look at it, what's going on. And I think that should really help.
Yeah, and experiment. Also,
Yeah.
one thing I've found helpful, and now that I know how to think about lighting and composition, some of my favorite Instagram accounts where I know that they take photos with their DSLR before they post, I try to figure out what they were doing, or I pay attention to where the light's coming in or where the light source might be coming in. I pay attention to the shadows more. So I'd encourage you to, as you're playing around with your DSLR, look at the way other people are taking photos and try to take notice of those things, how they're laying out their composition. But yeah, would you recommend, do you find yourself doing that too, Chaitra?
Yes, especially at the beginning, I would wonder, now, how is that happening? On Pinterest, all the photos look so white, bright, and beautiful. I was like, why am I not able to do that? But slowly, as you kind of observe and see what's kind of giving that effect to your photos, you'll start to tweak a little by little by little, and you'll get there someday. I mean, I'm not there yet, but I think I can eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's the way we all are. You can always get better with these things. Even with Illustrator, I've been in Illustrator for over 8 years and teach a course on it. But there are so many capabilities that I have so much more to learn too. So
Totally.
it's kind of fun. It's a creative challenge. I'm going to go ahead and get started on, we have one question up right now. So if you have another question that we may not have gotten to, or you want something explained again, feel free to leave a question in there and we'll answer it for you. The question in there right now is from Sarah, and she says, I'm doing a lot of photos and videos indoors, like food, cooking videos, how-tos. And she says that she has to use artificial lighting. She likes natural light as well. So she asks, do you have a recommendation for a lighting kit and what type of lights? There are so many different types of lights. And she uses a Nikon D7000, I think that is. So what would you recommend in terms of lighting kits? I know that you take photos with natural light, but do you know of any lighting kits that would come?
Yes, there are many lighting kits. You can get them for cheap on Amazon too. It doesn't have to break your bank. You can get them for as little as maybe $60 to $100 as well. I can definitely send the links for the artificial lighting kits that I've personally seen, like my friends use or something. I'll definitely let you know. I don't have it right now, but I can share that with you. I'll let you know, Lauren, so you can share it with them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I know too, for my friend Andrea Pesci, who has taken photos for me in the past, we redid our apartment at the time, and she came and took photos of it so we could get it published. And it was a super dark, rainy day, probably like some of the days that you have in Seattle, Chaitra. And it was really dark and overcast. There was no light coming in, and it was the middle of the day. And she had these, and I'll have to find the links for you too. I'm not sure what they're called, but they were these lights, and she said they weren't very expensive. And they looked really blue in person, but in the photos they didn't, but they were supposed to be the same warmth as natural daylight. And there were umbrellas around them too, and they were on stands. It looked like something off of a crazy set, but it really wasn't that expensive. And somebody sent me another resource the other day. So in the replay, maybe we'll round up those resources for you really quickly and send that out, as well as the exposure triangle cheat sheets too. But that was a great question. Thank you, Sarah. All right, we have another question. And this is from Tennille. What are the best sites to reference for research on lens? She says she has a Nikon D3300. I think that's the model number is what she says. So how do you know which lens to use? Where do you know to even get started?
So obviously, Google is the answer for everybody's any question. So I obviously use Google, but there are a few websites which kind of list these things in real detail. So I know digitalphotographyschool.com. I think that has a lot of details on lenses. And I think Google, yeah, I usually go to Google. I also go to Pinterest for, especially if you want to know what works in the blogging world. I think Pinterest is a great source of information when it comes to anything photography related. So yes, definitely I would look on Pinterest. I would look on Google, and obviously digitalphotographyschool.com.
digitalphotographyschool.com. Also, what was the lens that you recommended that you use? Will you name that one more time?
Yes, sure. It's the Canon 50mm f1.8 lens.
Okay, so Canon 50 or was it 500 mm?
No, 50
already lost
mm.
already. 50 mm. All right.
Yes.
So that's good to know too. All right, we have another one that just came in.
Okay.
So it looks like Lakeitha, I think that's how I say it. She says she has fashion clients and that they have their products in her office. She says we would like to have pictures for our social media, and she noticed everyone has a white background and it looks fresh and professional, but her interiors are black. So how does she capture great photos?
Okay. So I think when it comes to the white photos, I have an answer because I kind of struggled with this for a long time. So it's very affordable and cheap. Just go to your local craft store and get white foam boards for just $2. And that should be an amazing fix to this problem. You can use white foam boards that you can get off your local craft store, just arrange them on the floor and even use it as a background and kind of click your photos right there. I actually did a DIY project to get that distressed white wooden background. So I kind of brought wooden planks from Home Depot and just glued them together, distressed them with black paint, and again painted white on top to get that rustic wooden feel. And that has actually been a background for my photos for a really long time. So that white thing, I think it really stands out. So you can use white foam boards. You can make your own, tabletops. You can also get the $10 coffee table from IKEA. So that really works as well. So for white background, basically just get a white surface, whether it's a tabletop or foam board, and that should definitely work.
And in terms of, those are great for desk settings, but what about if they wanted to take a photo? So they said for products, but what about for people? Would you recommend just positioning them close to the window too? So if you were taking a picture, because she says fashion clients, so if they were wearing the products, would you recommend that they just stand near a window, even if they have black in the background of the, I guess, of the photo frame, positioning close to a really good light source?
Yes, so try to place your models right next to the window or the natural light source. But if that's not possible, that's okay. So you get this running rolls of white paper, I suppose, on Amazon. Again, I can send the link to that one as well. So if you have black walls, you can actually fix that. What do I say? It's like a roll of white sheets. You can hang it on in a particular place, fix it there, and then the roll just keeps running. So the white sheets just keep running, and you can use that as the background for your models. So you can get that in varying sizes. So that should totally work in this case. Yes.
That's great advice. All right, we have another one. Lauren asks, what is your go-to sweet spot setting for a blurry background?
Okay. Awesome. So yes, this is my favorite thing. So basically, when it comes to this blurry background effect, we are talking about adjusting the F numbers to kind of vary the depth of field. So if you want just the number, I'd say so my f1.8 lens that I was just talking about allows me to go as low as f1.8. But I don't go that low. I keep it somewhere between f2.2 and f2.8. That's like my sweet spot. So in that particular setting, it very nicely blurs out your background and really makes your foreground really sharp and focused.
That's really helpful. And you can refer back to that cheat sheet where you can see the depth of field. And as it comes up to that point, everything else that gets blurry around the side. So if you want to increase your depth of field or decrease it, you can see it there too.
I can actually explain the depth of field if you'd like me to.
Sure. You want me to go back to that?
No, just no, I can just tell it here. Okay. Because we've been talking about depth of field, I realized, but I haven't really told what it is.
Yeah.
So basically the depth of field, so there's a zone when you're taking a photo, there's a zone in front of your subject, and there's a zone right behind your subject that is in focus. So this total area, the total zone which is in focus is called the depth of field. So if this depth of field is really shallow, which means that the overall distance is really less, then it's very easy to attain that blurry effect. But let's say your depth of field is really deep. So in that case, a lot of objects around your subject is in focus. So in that case, it's really difficult to achieve the blurry thing. So everything will be in focus. So yes, that is what depth of field is all about.
Very helpful. Thank you. We have one more question. I think we have time to answer it. We have a couple more minutes. Emma asks, let me put this up so you can see it. Hi guys, most of the photos I take are product shots for my woodwork business. I've always wondered if it was worth connecting my Canon DSLR to my MacBook so my photos can be viewed on screen immediately while shooting. Oh, that's awesome. I never even would have thought of that. She says, do you know of any programs to use for that?
Yes, so this is called tethering the laptop with your camera. So the biggest advantage is that while you're shooting photos, you can see them in real time on your desktop. Now that small window on your camera, that gives you a very limited view of your photo. But when you see it blown up on a laptop screen, you kind of can see the flaws and what mistakes or everything more clearly. So I think that's where tethering is really useful. And for tethering, I have tried Adobe Lightroom. The tethering software in that is pretty good. Yeah, I've used that and it's pretty good. Just basically connect a cable from my camera to my laptop, fix it on a tripod, take photos, and see my photos on Adobe Lightroom.
Awesome.
As they come in, yeah.
So Lightroom.
Yes.
Good to know. These are great questions. Well, great. So I just want to say a quick thank you to Chaitra for coming on and explaining more about how to take high quality photos. We really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom.
Oh, yes, totally. Thank you so much again for having me, Lauren. It was a lot of fun to hang out with all of you and talk about photography, which is one of my favorite topics. And if you guys have any questions anytime, please feel free to shoot me an email and we can chat there as well. So also, good luck with your upcoming visual marketing course, Lauren. I'm really excited about that as well.
Thank you. So just really quickly, if people want to get in touch with you and want to start following along with you, where should they go?
So yes, you can go to my website, which is itspinkpot.com. And yes, you can email me as well. You can see all the contact details there. And also, I do have an exciting launch that's coming up on the 2nd of February, which is just a couple of weeks away, and I'm super excited. In fact, this is the first place I'm even talking about this. So I'm launching a custom brand photography program, which means that I will be working one-on-one with creative businesses to come up with a photo pack that is exclusive to their brand. So each photo will be styled, shot, and edited specifically for the brand. So yes, please feel free to visit Creative Convex at bit.ly/creativeconvex. And yes, you can receive free photo packs as well as updates about my upcoming programs as well. So yeah, I'd love to see you guys there as well in Creative Convex.
Awesome. Thank you, Chaitra. And for those of you who are interested in more content from Ellen Company, if you're interested in how to take visuals like photos and use them to create more sales for your business, I have a really exciting LChat coming up next week too. I don't think I've ever worked so hard or been more excited about an offering from Ellen Company. A lot of hard work has gone into this, and I'm most excited because I see how helpful it will be for the Ellen Company audience, for creative entrepreneurs. It's something that I wish I had when I first started out and first launched my first course or started producing services and putting them out there. I didn't really know how to market myself, and I didn't know steps to take. I had no marketing plan. I just saw what everyone else was doing. I'd come up with a quick image and share it on Instagram, but I had no system and I had no method. So next week, I'm going to share that method with you and lots of research that I've done, and I'm really excited. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can go to the Ellen Company website, ellencompanydesign.com, and then up at the top, there's an announcement bar. If you click it, you can learn more about that webinar. But a quick way, if you're already interested and want to sign up and join me again next Thursday, if you see my little icon on your screen, whether it's through the chat feature or it should be up above the video, I think. Your screen looks a little different than mine. If you click it, you should be able to see the next webinar, and you can go ahead and sign up. It's going to be next Thursday at 8 p.m. Until about 9:15. I'll share all about how to create a marketing plan of 5 steps that I have for a visual marketing plan, and you'll get first access to the new course. There might even be an in-person event. I don't know. So I would love for you to join me. But thank you all for tuning in. I'll be sending out a replay and those cheat sheets shortly, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.